Yippee fry-yay, Broncos country. While the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Ravens last night in the first game of the NFL season was not what any of us wanted, it would have been amazing to have Patrick Mahomes lose in front of the home crowd. But there was very, very good news, as I think we really saw a blueprint for how to beat the Chiefs, and they looked way more beatable than I would have guessed going into this year where they have a chance to three-peat. We get more good news about the Denver Broncos and their chances against the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday, and we get more good news on the injury front in the AFC West. We're going to break all that down and a ton more in this video. If you actually believe in the Denver Broncos and want them in the playoffs this year, you don't believe we're rebuilding, you believe we're rebuilt. Helps me out a ton if you would like and subscribe, and let's dive in. So my biggest takeaway from last night's game was just seeing how good that Ravens defense is from a personnel standpoint, that they have Pro Bowlers all over the place, and that Mike MacDonald's success with the Ravens was way more due to the talent that he had than his individual ability to call or scheme anything up. And the Ravens have always been known for their defense. I remember going back to the Ray Lewis years, it's always been a house of horrors to go and play against the Baltimore Ravens. And just seeing that the Ravens last night, they had so much more talent to execute the scheme that they wanted to than the Seattle Seahawks do. And so we are playing the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday with Mike MacDonald as the head coach who wants to implement everything they have in Seattle, but he does not have the personnel to be able to do that. He does not have one of the better linebackers in the entire league like he did last year with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, and seeing how the Ravens used their linebackers last night to guard wideouts. And while there were a couple times Rashid Rice would cook Roquan Smith, they were able to actually figure out what Mahomes was trying to do and stop it as the game kind of progressed. And that makes me incredibly encouraged about Sunday, you guys, because that ability to have a defense where all 11 people know what every single person on that defense's job is to do, that takes a lot of years to get there. That cannot happen in a preseason, and it definitely can't happen on like such a soft preseason like we have now, where you have such a limited amount of time to learn and actually be in pads and actually hit. And it definitely can't happen when you have some of your better players who haven't even been able to practice or have gotten hurt in preseason games. And that's where we're at with the Seattle Seahawks. So I would be way more scared playing Seattle week 11 than I am week 1, because that system is going to take a long time to get to where they were with the Ravens, and they're not there. They're definitely not going to be there on Sunday. And those injuries and all the people who've been missing practice just continue to add up, that they're out. Nuwasu, the former Bronco Draymond Jones, was limited in practice and might not play. And if that's the case, I'm not even scared whatsoever about this pass rush for the Seattle Seahawks. So looking at the complexities of that Ravens defense last night makes me very encouraged, because Seattle will not be there week 1, and that's a cold hard fact. The other thing that had me extremely encouraged was just thinking of the daunting thing in front of us, that we have Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in our division. Well, even with the Kansas City, it came down last night to a centimeter, and the Ravens would have beat them last night, and the Kansas City Chiefs were amped up. Like the amount of energy and hype that they had last night, as opposed to when they played Detroit Lions in week 1 a year ago, you just saw a complete difference. You saw how bad the Chiefs wanted it last night. And all the talk all year long was like, Mahomes hasn't had weapons like this ever, and he's going to be throwing for 52 touchdowns like he did a couple years ago. And we didn't see that last night. And I know the Ravens defense is good, but we just saw Mahomes, like he had that one nice touchdown on a blown coverage. And other than that, they looked incredibly beatable last night. How many times did the Kansas City Chiefs have the ball in plus territory? There was a bizarre missed field goal by one of the best field goal kickers in the history of the game in Tucker. And so they had the ball on the other side of the 50 there. There's that 4th down conversion that they blew when they'd schemed it up perfectly. So they had the ball on the 50 again. And then there was a time when Lamar Jackson was strip sacked on like the 10-yard line. And even with all of that happening, the Chiefs only scored 27 points. And I just think the Broncos now have the offense to be putting up 28 points and not even thinking about it, which, there was a couple years ago where it's like, if we broke 10, we were excited. And now I think our floor is like a 24-point team. And so I just thought the Chiefs last night barely won when they were amped up. at home, getting the trophy and presented to them and their crowd. And they had every single advantage from a referee standpoint that I've ever seen. And I just don't think that can continue without people starting to turn off their TV. So at the end of each week, every team gets a chance to submit questionable plays to the league. And there's already been a report that the Ravens have a massive mashup of all of the missed calls last night. So obviously you have these blatant face mask calls right here. There were several others of those throughout the night. Their left tackle, or their right tackle in this instance, was getting like almost a 1 second jump off of the ball, just over and over and over and over again. And then the other thing that was driving me nuts was obviously the only person who's supposed to be able to call a timeout that's honored is your head coach and your captain of your team. And here you see their defensive coordinator, Spagnuolo, run down the line and get a timeout, and no penalty was awarded, and they honored the timeout. And then just seeing the Ravens, how many times, I think it was like 4 times on that opening drive, the Ravens were called for illegal formation because of how their right tackle or their left tackle was lined up in the backfield. And you looked, and the Chiefs did the exact same thing, and it never was called. So all this to say, I think that the league is going to see this, and they're going to just see the outrage. This is all you see on Twitter right now, was how the refs gave this game to the Chiefs last night. And I think we will see that swing back in a way where if this is going to impact ratings, and if you're a ref and you know like everyone in the world thinks that the Chiefs get an unfair advantage, it might actually make the bias go the other way. Even with the refs against them, even with the home crowd behind them, even with the energy of opening night, the Chiefs really won by a centimeter. And that should be good news for us as Broncos fans, because I think the Chiefs are extremely, extremely beatable. Everything I was saying about Travis Kelce kind of was true, that he didn't look like one of the best tight ends in the league last night. He might obviously play himself into shape or be saving it for a playoff push, but I think Father Time is undefeated, and he's going to be 35 when the Broncos play him. And we know tight ends take a nosedive off of a cliff after, once they get into their 30s. Other thing, a lot of people were discouraged about Xavier Worthy scoring 2 touchdowns in his first ever game, and like, oh, it's not fair that the Chiefs ended up having him. One of them was on a completely blown coverage play that I think the Ravens have a new defensive coordinator now. I don't think that happens again, that you have that big of a missed assignment where you had the corner guarding the split out or the wheel route there by the running back. And so then you had Xavier Worthy literally wide open down the sideline. I don't think that happens when you've had a team that's like on the same page and have a defensive coordinator that's doing that. And I just think that speedster type receiver like he is, as we get into snow games, he's like your convertible sports car that you're not taking out on a winter road. And so I'm not scared of Xavier Worthy. And obviously these words can come back and bite me in the butt. Other good news that we're getting is that we're hearing more people on the national beat start to pick up what we've been saying in Broncos country, which is Sean Payton and Bo Nix are going to be a pretty scary duo. Sean Payton against rookie head coaches is like 13-2 or something like that. And we know Mike MacDonald has a brand new system he's got to implement with way less talent. He's got a brand new offensive coordinator there in Seattle who's never called a game in the NFL. He was formerly with Washington. And I just think Sean Payton and company are going to absolutely feast. Other good news that we got here was they've ran the numbers, and the Denver Broncos have actually gotten a lot younger, which I think is the way this NFL is going. You saw last year the Packers being a young team and making that push, and it's awesome to see that we went from one of the oldest teams in the league to now we are one of the youngest, and I think that is, we're setting our base this year at 9 wins, and we're just going to keep building from there, and that's fantastic. Last piece of good news here, and don't want to be cheering at someone else's expense, but the only thing that is scary about the Raiders to me, they do not have a quarterback who can get the ball to their weapons. They have Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. I really think obviously Stidham and Zach Wilson would be better than both of those guys. Either of those options would be, and so I'm not scared of them, but their defense is insane, especially after going out and getting Christian Wilkinson, one of the better defensive tackles in the league, and then obviously having Max Crosby, they really were relying on this guy, Malcolm Kuntz, and he had a non-contact knee injury, and that just never bodes well. And so that would be great news for the Broncos if their defensive line took a step back. Thanks for watching. If you are still watching and you're a diehard, I grew up in Denver, listened to 104.3 The Fan all the time, and my favorite ever radio segment was the Big Al and D-Mac on Fridays used to do this thing called the Friday Football Fire Up. They'd play awesome music, they'd play highlights of the Broncos, and just basically get all of Broncos country hyped up for the things to come. Well, Big Al left the network. Now D-Mac's off of 104.3 The Fan. And they don't do the Fire Up anymore, so I'm like, I got to bring the Fire Up back. And when I was living in Denver, every day every Friday at 4:55, my family knew, hey, I need to be in a room alone because I called in and just spit the hottest fire on the line and got all Broncos country hyped up. So I've done that as well. So if you have a second, it'll be on this side. Will you click and watch my Fire Up and get fired up because the Denver Broncos are going to go into Seattle and they're going to shock the world, and that's something we can all believe in. That was robbed.